Hey, Mandy.
Hey guys, can you hear, like, everything is fine? You can hear me and see me in real time? Awesome. But you might hear like screaming children in the background. So just to
Adds
let
to the
you know.
ambiance.
Right, yeah.
We're all trying to do this during, regular life. So this like real life just happens, so it's okay.
Right, yeah. Yeah, real life has been happening a lot lately. Anyways,
Good afternoon. Hi, I'm Amanda Krugliak. I'm the arts curator at the Institute for the Humanities Gallery, and this is House Calls. I want to introduce first our artist for today, Mandy Cano Villalobos. Hello, Mandy.
hello.
Mandy is an artist that originally I learned about and met at Art Prize some years ago in Grand Rapids. And she does amazing performance and installation work and also work in two dimensions, sculptural work. So really wonderful mix of media and styles that we'll learn about a little bit later. And I want to introduce you to our team members as well. We have Angela Abiodun, who is our new collaborations and outreach manager. And also Juliette Heinley, who's our production coordinator for the Institute for the Humanities Gallery. Just a little background on this whole project and how it came about. The Institute had plans with support of the Mellon Foundation to have a regional exhibition over the summer. And suddenly we all have been thrust into these uncertain times due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So as a humanities institution, thinking about human relationships, and as curators and artists, we felt it imperative to think about how to be responsive, how to translate that project into a way of reaching out and checking in and understanding for us, and I would imagine everyone, that relationships right now are critical in a way that we might not have even thought of before. So that was the whole idea behind House Calls. And here we are with really a pretty straightforward goal in mind to check in and ask you, Mandy, how are you doing?
I will be honest. So my parents have been taking care of my kids for over a month, and they just came back this past week. So it's been difficult, that transition, but overall, I think we're holding up fairly well.
How old are your kids, Mandy?
Like, I don't know. They keep changing. 3, 5, and 8. The 3-year-old's about to turn 4 this month.
And so where were your parents? Are they in Grand Rapids or?
They are in Alabama. So right when schools closed, I was like, let's go for a road trip, because it's obviously winter here for 10 months out of the year, whereas in Alabama, it's summer for 10 months out of the year. So they have a large yard with a tree house, and we just went there and I stayed for a week, and that was kind of wonderful. And then I drove back to winter and locked myself in a house and did a lot of studio work. So, yeah.
And is this unusual for them to also have that time with family, the children? So.
Well, typically once a year, usually during the summer, I'll go on a month-long residency. So it's kind of this tradition to inundate my children with grandparent time. But I think that's good, because my mother, for the first couple of years of my life, was a single mom in the Army. So my family raised me. She would just ship me off to a variety of different relatives. So like, I think, I hope that's good for my children, just to be like shipped off and raised by my entire familial community. We'll see how that works out.
At the beginning of this, I know past artists have talked about trying to reframe this moment as like a mini residency, because they're because we're all forced to be in the home. Was that something you were trying to do, or what was your relationship to your work kind of like when you took your kids down to your parents and you came back up?
Yeah, I didn't look at it that way because a lot of it had to do with like trying to rearrange the house so that we could all live together without killing each other and like partition off rooms for different children. But then like as I was getting work done, I realized like this really is an opportune time, which part of me feels guilty thinking about it that way, just because I realize that there are so many people out there that are suffering for a variety of different reasons. But you know, I really kind of enjoyed the time being able to dedicate so much of my thought to studio practice, because often, you know, even though I'll stay up late while the kids are in bed, or I'll try to wake up early and work in the studio, it's not the same as having a huge chunk of the day to even be able to not only work on stuff by yourself, but to read or to listen to audiobooks. Like that, just those are really precious, like much desired time that I don't usually have.
Yeah, I found my relationship to time during this is kind of, it feels surreal sort of time in this moment. And it's hard to like track as I normally would because I'm not moving as I do. Do you find that what is your relationship to time in the midst of this?
Well, so actually a lot of my work has to do with time. Like time is atemporal or chronological in terms of storytelling, or like meditative, and not necessarily losing track of time as much as engaging with time in a way that things like everyday schedules don't necessarily allow. So I agree with you that you do lose this kind of sense of, well, obviously like normalcy, but also like of presence, because you don't have other people to affirm your presence, or like even the progression of the day. Like sure, the sun is passing or whatever, here the clouds, but like it gets darker at some point. But I would try to set up a schedule, and then I just found it kind of falling apart, and trying to embrace more this this sense of like an all-encompassing time that I feel is kind of like ancient to us as humans. That's something that's like an internal clock that like in following an actual clock, or in following, you know, the societal like schedule, we lose that sense. So I was trying to embrace that more. And I did this series of performances that had a lot to do with repetition, and a lot to do with like affirming our presence regardless of the lost kind of like whatever, you know, the almost the strategic sense of time that we have, like trying to get rid of that and again embrace a different understanding of what time can be, or what time once was for.
Yeah. And how we can then like structure our understandings of ourselves, our understandings of like what we produce, our understandings of how we value the progression of time. Like at the very beginning of this, I saw a lot of parents and teachers posting schedules that like they were following or encouraging kids to follow. And I would wonder what happened to those schedules in this moment, because it just seemed almost unrealistic given the added like emotional strain also of this moment. So yeah.
I think Angela too, we've talked, Angela and I have talked about this as well, this sense of time and how it pertains to your identity. Like you, in the middle of this or through this, there was that initial crisis, and then it's felt as if time has changed again. And you get to this place where without those markers, whether it's children or a job or routine, or this is the way I do something, you're suddenly asking, who am I in all this? Like it's a very reflective time, or an opportunity for that reflection as to what matters. Who are we?
Yeah.
Is there, you were saying you've done a series of performances since self-isolation started, is that right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, can you like tell us some about them? Is there anything you can show us about them?
Well, so a lot of my performances before quarantine were all about kind of this sense of ritual. And I was just speaking with someone the other day about like my dorky love for Walter Benjamin, and especially like art in the age of mechanical reproduction, and that understanding of like what art was before Western civilization kind of like exerted this exhibition value on it. Like, what could art fundamentally be for humans? The performances that I was doing were trying to get at that sense of ritual, and it was always a performance kind of for an audience, and understanding that even if an audience wasn't present, there was always going to be this like presentation via film or via photography. So while in quarantine, I cleared out my daughter's bedroom and realized like what an excellent opportunity it was in this empty white room to, in a way, kind of trap myself in there and have these ritualistic experiences, but it was always before the camera. So in a way, it is again like that sense of reaffirming your presence, but like speaking to or having this ritual that is shared via social media for the rest of the world to connect with. So in a way, trying to somehow access a sense of relationship, particularly using the medium of like Instagram, and not necessarily like in a way that is spectacular, like the spectacle, but in a way that utilizes Instagram for relationship. And I think that that's something that everybody's aware of, but whether we can really kind of maybe not, I don't want like cleanse it from the spectacle, but like is there a way that we can really like almost hold each other's hands through this via images or via video? So a lot of those performances were about like ripping pages from a book, or drinking whiskey without drinking it, like just literally like chugging it and spitting it back out. So this idea of like meaningless repetition, or like not being able to progress or having something be futile, and that's kind of what life has become, more or less. So we're always kind of like questioning, what is the meaning of this day? How does it relate to tomorrow? How does it relate to yesterday? How can I engage the right now? And a lot of those, like, really, they're kind of boring performances, like purposefully so. It's me doing a lot of the same thing, like moving peas one by one from one bowl to another. But it's all about questioning the meaning of what we're doing right now. Like, what is the context of that, you know? Yeah.
I think performance too, Mandy, is entirely about embracing that impermanence, that vulnerability. So there's a way. I've also been thinking about how to make a shift from these exhibitions with crowds or groups of people. How might we engage with art, even in public spaces, that's more about that individual, intimate experience where you're witnessing something, or it's more contemplative, but it's all about the moment rather than thinking always about having to have proof of something. So it feels like a definite shift in what art can do in this moment as well.
Yeah. I agree.
Something that you said, Mandy, also made me think about the both literal and like metaphoric notion of death. So like I think we're like surrounded by a lot of literal death, which cannot be avoided, which should not be ignored. And to your point about this, like learning, I feel like learning comes when space is made, when something is removed, when something is expanded. And that to me speaks of a metaphoric death also. And so I would wonder, how does that idea of like impermanence, of death, create space for growth? And like, how do you see it coming up in your work?
I think it's really easy to ignore that reality that like we're all gonna die. When you're operating on an everyday basis, when you have these tasks to do, when you go to a job, when you have kids like screaming at you all the time, like it's easy to not remember, to ignore the reality that this moment you will never have again. So just to see that play out on this larger role, and this may sound horrible, but I'm so glad that we've arrived, like I'm glad that we're becoming more aware of our mortality, because that means that we'll be able to truly engage, invest, and be present now. And that is a struggle, and that is, that sense of being uncomfortable. You can never grow unless you are extraordinarily uncomfortable. Well, guess what? We're all really uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
So, how are we going to use that? Like, that's our decision,
Mandy, do you have work at the house? Other things you wanted to show us?
Well, right now, I'm smelling rotting oranges right now. So I've been working on a series that has to do with mythology and how, like, this idea of embodied text or storytelling in a way that isn't necessarily verbal, and that has to do with like matrilineal passing down of histories. And so a lot of that has to do with me looking at like Greek mythology and kind of addressing them in a way that's woman-centered. So I've been sewing a lot of oranges using kind of these Greek designs, and not necessarily retelling, but rethinking the story of Persephone and Hades and Demeter, and these like relationships of mother and child, and wife and husband, and kind of looking at it through this feminist perspective. So a lot of it has to do with like the fruit of the earth, and I can pick up the computer and move it around a little bit. But I've also been using like frozen blueberries, and various seeds that I've collected over the course of time. But I'll kind of move around a little bit. So right now I have some blueberries kind of soaking into some fabric that I've sewn.
It's all like smocked around the edges. Is that right?
Well, it's been dyed in wine and tea, which are materials that I use fairly frequently. And then I've like repetitively sewn these bits of familial clothing together. And in a way, I'm creating not only textile works, but also illuminated manuscripts in a way that also add these constellations that I'm kind of just making. And they're not necessarily like constellations that exist, but using constellations as a means of storytelling or visual storytelling. So, and then there are like these seeds from different plants. These are pomegranates, and then these are cherry pits. And then I've also been sewing over various books. Actually, this is a children's book. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah. A lot of it has been sewing, and I feel like that process itself has been just reflective of our state, or of me being like stationary in the house. At least I can still kind of take needle and thread and repetitively, meditatively, like put things together. And then this is kind of the desk that I mostly work at. So yeah, that's the studio.
I love that all the things you're showing us are so tactile, and how, it's like, just, I want to leap into the square and touch it. And it makes me think this is like my visual senses maybe are working double time to be able to process an object that I can't get close to, because I can almost sense it, even though it's on the screen.
Well, that's also part of what I love about like the Western exhibition tradition, because it's like, even if I'm making textile works, like you want to touch them, don't you? But you can't because they're behind glass, you know. So that's like the desire and then the unfulfillment of that desire, or even like the, you know, the inability or inhibition that like is constantly forced upon us. Like I love that tension. So I feel like that's my life. That's like this metaphor for my life. Like, oh, you want it? You can't have it. But yeah.
Yeah, definitely. With all of this as exploration for us, this conversation that we had, I guess I really just want to ask you, what do you feel the role of art and artists are at a moment like this, at this time?
I hate the idea of relegating art to therapy, but I do wonder to what extent, like right now, you know, should we as artists be trying to grasp the beautiful or the like, you know, there's so much that's going on in terms of isolation, in terms of death, in terms of pain. How do we sift through all of that to find these moments of beauty? And then how can we hold those out as a, not even necessarily a sense of encouragement, as much as a sense of like affirmation, like this will, like this too shall pass, you know, this is not all there is. This is not, it's not, the now is important, but there's so much more that encompasses the now, you know. So at least that's the way that I'm looking at the role of what I'm making right now. I can't speak for others, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that like this time is really making it very clear how we are small parts of a much bigger picture, and like, or you know, bigger story, bigger history, especially in terms of, I mean, in terms of time, as we've been talking about, like the way that this pandemic is constantly being like people keep referring to the 1918 flu, I think partially because we need to have some sense that like we've gotten through this before, but also that this is like this is part of a really long story, and we're just here right now. And yeah, art does give us lots of different ways to ask that question, or like experiment with ourselves in that timeline.
Yeah, there's this like sense of longevity, like because I've moved around so much, and because that sense of belonging is not something that I've ever felt like I truly have accessed. I'm always looking to the before and the after, or trying to position myself as a lineage. And I just wonder, is there a way to position art to again, like tell our stories, to give us a sense of longevity beyond our personal selves? You know?
Yeah, to be restorative, to be repair, you know, to repair. There's something right now for me about art, rather than thinking of it only as critique or making these broader statements, that there's something about art, hopefully, that can be restorative and can offer some repair. Not to return to the old system, but I'm thinking spiritually, not in terms of failed systems, but spiritually.
Yeah, like I was listening to an artist talk the other day, the difference between like mending and fixing. We're not, you know, mending is recognizing the brokenness, not trying to like go back to before the brokenness, or not trying to completely like get rid of evidence of the brokenness, but to embrace the brokenness and mend it and go on to be even stronger than before, right? So yeah, how do we use now and mend it, hopefully.
And to your thoughts about beauty, I think like the notion of beauty is one that helps get through the dark moments. And like I see our world being a constant existence of both beauty and dark, or light and dark, not to like hold them as oppositional, but as both like realities. And so like you are creating beauty in this moment, but I would also wonder what exists outside of what you're creating that feeds you in the way that you're looking to feed others with your work.
I can talk the talk, but now that my kids are back, this is hard,
Yeah.
Like, this is really hard. Like, it's rainy and gray outside, and like, okay, so do I want my kids to learn something? And do I need to sit next to them all day long to like make sure that they're keeping up with the schedule? Or should I let them watch TV all day and go back to my studio, But like, I know I'm not in control. Like, that's been a reality for me for a while, so I'm not in control. What do I do with that? Well, to the best of my ability, I try to lovingly interact with others, but like, there's freedom in knowing that you're not in control, or even that, really, like, I just feel like we all live under this facade that we are in control, or that we like know things that we don't know. Like there's so little that we know, Like, I don't know, like that's not a cop-out as much as just this recognition that I'm completely and totally finite. And surprise, everyone is,
Yeah. As a note back to your blueberries, every time I look up into this, there's like a game that a couple of my friends and I play. And it's like, when you look at the sky, what do you feel? Is one of the questions. And it's like that notion that we're small, that there's so much out there and inside of this earth that we just don't know. And so what does it mean for us to lean into that? And to have children is a whole nother layer of, interrogating that question. And that sense of, and like, what grace can be found in being soft with yourself, with your lack of knowing. I think that's a hard thing, but it's something we're being faced with even largely now.
Yeah.
Not a question, but I remember when I had small children that the one thing that did give me a sense of clarity was that responsibility to care for those children. That in my life, even at times of that were tumultuous, that I remember very clearly to wake up and think, I fed the baby, I protected the child, I sheltered the child. That those gave me a moment of calm and a sense of being grounded in a way that I'd never really known in my life. That's all right.
Like, I don't know if that was supposed to be encouraging, but like, I'm like,
it helps. It helps.
Yeah, you're right. And I think I need to just like congratulate myself more. Like, you got the chicken nuggets. Good.
You got it.
Go away. No, just kidding.
Go girl. Go girl. You got it.
Right.
Thank you so much,
Thank you
Mandy,
so much.
Yeah, thank you for having us into your house today, and with so many things that you have going on. Thank you for just letting us into your thoughts about all this time.
No, thank you so much for like the opportunity to see other people and talk to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, see ya.